and welcome to the Flatbill Pastor Podcast.
Yay.
My name is Marky Harrison, and this is Clint Nolder. And this is episode 1.
Episode 1.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk?
Pilot episode.
Pilot episode. Yeah, this might not be any good. No one might care to listen or watch. And who knew that people watch podcasts? Evidently, that's the thing. So
Evidently, it's a major thing.
it's amazing. Evidently, and I'm behind. I'm years behind.
You're here now.
We're here.
That's all that
and
matters.
it's episode 1 of our podcast here in my office. And
Where are we?
We're in my office in downtown Noonan, Georgia.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
And ta-da, and here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about whatever's on your notes. I think the important thing is we want to talk about maybe some things that are difficult to talk about in a church context, or difficult things that people just long term would like to have a conversation with a pastor of a church, but maybe either they don't know one, or if they know one, they're intimidated, or they just already kind of assume, hey, they don't want to spend time with me, they don't want to talk to me, they don't want to answer my questions. And if they were to answer my questions, they're probably, hurtful or whatever. I don't know, fill in the blank. I mean, who knows what they're thinking? I'm not sure. But
Right.
That's what we would like to do, is just try to find a different way to communicate a real perspective of a real Jesus, and not a manufactured Jesus that's kind of, happened in our world and our culture over, centuries. I mean, he's been, off the grid for about 2,000 years. And so a lot of, just like a game of telephone, you start with one thing and then over the years, it kind of becomes something different. And I think the idea would be that, we give people a really clear glimpse of what Jesus is and who he's supposed to be.
I gotcha. And I totally agree that people definitely everybody has a different perspective, I think, with their collective church experience of who Jesus is or could be in their mind. But I think what a lot of people struggle with is what other people define as a biblical perspective of Jesus. And breaking into that, trying to be a part of a church, is really difficult. And it can make you feel like you're breaking into a clique, and you feel kind of invisible with your own perspectives. And I don't know, what would you say to somebody who was feeling a little bit unseen in a church full of people, full of cliques?
Yeah. Man, that's difficult. So I think I want to say two things. I want to say a number of things, but I want to say it to two different groups of people. So first, I want to address the people that are feeling that way, that can't break through the cliques. And then I think also, just in case there's some of those people in the cliques that listen, I'd like to address them too. Which one should I address first?
Let's talk about the invisible first. I think that's fitting.
Yeah. So I think, to begin with, let's say no matter who you are or where you're from, what your baggage is, or your experience in church, no matter what you've done in your life, whether it's been incredible or you made some mistakes, or maybe you've made no mistakes, like you've been just like as good as it gets, right? Regardless of any of those, none of those things weigh in. If you kind of come to this place in your soul where you're like, you know what, there's something pulling me towards something more, something bigger than myself, and you think that church could be the answer, and you've gotten to a place where you've given it a try and it doesn't feel like you can break through or break in or be seen, or that anyone actually cares that you've been there. My first thing is please keep trying. Because the truth is that, I can't see their face right now. So if you're listening and that's where you're at, I can't see your face to communicate with you that, and kind of lock eyes with you and say, hey, this is the truth. But the real truth is they're worth it. And unfortunately, they're not hearing anyone else tell them that they're worth the added effort, because I believe the church can add and can be an incredibly beautiful, life-giving thing when it's healthy. And they just got to keep pushing through it. And unfortunately, and I know it's easy to say, but unfortunately, most times, you give it a try, you give it a shot, and it doesn't work. And it's like, okay, well, if God was real, if Jesus really cared, if this whole thing was legit, then when I showed up, it would have worked for me. And unfortunately, that's not really the way God works. Like 99% of the things that happen in this world that God signs his name to is done through people. And those people are not perfect people. And so I think it's the first thing is if you feel ignored and underwhelmed and like everyone at the church that you give it a try is ignoring you, which then kind of makes you feel like, well, I'm a nobody. I'm worthless. I would say you're worth it to continue to go right now. Maybe you've tried a wrong church, right? So maybe try a different one. But for sure, keep trying because I do believe there's a healthy church I want to believe there's a healthy church in all communities.
Right.
That at some point you can find a place where you belong. So I would say you just gotta keep trying. Which again, I know just sounds so easy sitting from a pastor's perspective, saying, just keep swimming and just keep swimming. But I really think that's the key because I think they're worth it. I think they're worth it, and I love a shot. I mean, anyone in our community, I would love a shot to make it right.
Right.
From our church's perspective, I'd love a shot to make it right. On the other side, the folks that are in whatever church, fill in the blank, and I'm sure there are people in our church that fall into this, right? Because no church is perfect all the time. I would say, hey, wake up, like, let's go. Raise your awareness of people that are disconnected and that maybe feel like they don't belong. And then maybe have a little internal conversation about, hey, if I really do believe that Jesus is who he says he is, if I really do believe that Jesus came for people that were completely disconnected from the Father, from God, and I'm sitting here in a church environment and all I'm concerned about is catching up with my friends, and I'm not concerned about anyone else that maybe don't have friends or maybe are brand new to the community or maybe giving God a chance for the very first time, I'd say we got to wake up,
right.
And I get it. I mean, the excuse is like, okay, well, I come to church to connect. Just like those people came to church connect, I came to church as a follower of Jesus. I came to church to connect. And so I want to connect with the people that I'm friends with. And so this is my time, right? And I think that's accurate, but I also think that, the people that we're friends with, it's maybe this is wrong, but honestly, if we're only connecting with people specifically solely on Sunday mornings, I mean, are they really the greatest friends we have? Are we really going to miss it if on a Sunday we decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to skip the conversation here and I'm going to search for someone who's by themselves. Like, is that really going to be all life altering for us because we didn't get that 15 minutes of connection? Because the truth is we still have friends. Well, if someone's showing up for the church for the first time or giving God a chance for the first time in a long time, or maybe the first time ever, they honestly might not have anyone,
right.
And they're thinking, hey, I'm going to use church to find these connections that actually do matter. And the flip side is let's say you're hanging out with your best friends that you see all the time. Well, then again, what is it going to matter if you miss a Sunday morning 15-minute conversation about what your football team did last week or what fantasy football is about to happen or what the Braves did or whatever it is? Like, it's not going to be life altering for us. But again, as a follower of Jesus, we have to be able to see that it could be life altering for us to take a break from our personal, gratifying our personal desires in terms of connection and pushing pause to help someone who's completely disconnected get connected. And we look at church, especially like, the average ages of church as an organization in the United States is like plus 60 years old. And I don't mean like age of people in the congregation, but the average age of a congregation existing in a particular, town or whatever.
Okay.
I've all been around for more than 60 years or on average. And so because of that, sometimes churches are generational, and, you're friends with someone who your parents are friends with their parents. And
it's like extended family.
Yes. And so it's difficult to break into that. You show up and it's kind of like a little family reunion type deal.
Right.
But I for sure, I think Christians have to do better. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to self-sacrifice. It's saying, I'm going to prioritize what Jesus wants for other people over what I want for myself in these particular situations. And to go back to the very first group of people, the people who are trying to break through but just can't. What if you did? What if you tried again and you ran into the group of people who said, you know what, I'm going to prioritize people who are disconnected over my own personal desires? Do you think you could break in? I think the answer is yes. Like, yeah, I think everybody would say, yeah, if I ran into someone who prioritized the disconnected over the connected, yeah, I probably could break into the clique. But the thought is I'm not going to run into anyone like that.
Or have you ever tried to picture the ideal set of people that would allow you in like that? Like, have you ever tried to picture the set of standards, so to speak, of the people that would be as accepting as you want? Like, have you ever tried to imagine who those people are that would be letting you in? Because, I mean, maybe you can't. Maybe you can't imagine what those people would be like. And so what if you get to those people, like you said, and it still doesn't feel like what you expected? And I think, too, I want to bring up that you're talking about the wrong church, so to speak.
Mm.
And I think I want to talk a little bit more about that because, I mean, what would you say is a wrong church? You know, how would you, as an individual looking for a church community or a community in general where you felt comfortable enough to ask questions and you know, have fellowship, so to speak, have friends, what are the determining factors of right and wrong?
Mm. Well, that's loaded.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, first, so my perspective of the church is, I want my perspective of the church to be the perspective of Jesus. And what we see, throughout what we refer to now as the New Testament, right? The Bible's got these two very distinct parts, the Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament chronicles just how God had a people and lost a people to evil, and how he begins to position himself to win them back. And it kind of chronicles a long piece of history that we know today as the people of God, or the Jewish people, the people of Israel. And then in the New Testament, we've got this, it's actually the rescue mission, right? Okay, I've lost my people to evil, but this is the rescue mission, and it centers around, the person of Jesus. And in that New Testament, we find that Jesus sees the church as a bride, right? So he's the groom, and then the church is the bride. And so he has a deep affection for the church. And when I say the church, I mean like Big C church, global church, all the churches kind of pushed together to make one big, church. And so for sure, Jesus has an affection for the church as a whole, even though the church has a lot of issues. That the bride isn't flawless and perfect and spotless. The truth is that Jesus is the only chance for the church to get right. And so when we think about, hey, is it the right church or the wrong church? I think sometimes there are confused churches, or lost churches, or maybe just wandering or drifting churches, or maybe even stubborn churches. I think I would use those words more than just right or wrong. And in the midst of those moments, in the midst of being stubborn, we can be wrong as a church. And in the midst of drifting and wandering, we can be wrong as a church. But at the same time, if you find a church that would be quote unquote like right, even they have the potential in seasons to do something completely wrong, because it's still organized by people. So if you're sitting there thinking like, okay, well, if I want to give it one more try, what am I looking for? Obviously, the web presence I think is great.
Okay.
And I think you can hop on and you can take a look and see. I think the natural thing is we're looking at, hey, do I see anyone that looks like me? Right? Do I see anyone that reminds me of the stage of life that I'm in, or what I could possibly be going through? When I listen online, does Is the language that's being spoken from the stage and through the online presence, are they words I understand? Is it everyday language? I think those are some of the beginning pieces to that. And then I think it's very contextual to who you are, right? So if you have kids, then we want to make sure that we're investigating, hey, what is the kids' policy? Is safety a big deal to them? Does it seem like education in terms of, like, I want my kid to learn something about what God desires for them, or is it just babysitting? And is there a way for us to kind of figure that? I think those are just basic standard pieces. Honestly, though, even if you have all those other things right, you can still show up to a church that looks right. But if the people in the church aren't aware of who they are and honestly, the reality that there are people who are disconnected from Jesus and from people showing up to try and get connected to, at minimum, people. And honestly, for someone who's completely disconnected from faith, getting connected to God might just be a bonus, right? In their minds, it's like, I don't even know if that's a priority. Like, that would be nice, but honestly, I would just like some people that are kind, to hang out and like do some things with, right? It's really tough.
I mean, it could be as simple as you move to a new place, and one easy thing is, people gather every Sunday in this community. So let's go see who we can meet. I mean, how many people are you going to meet in the grocery store,
Sure.
And I think getting to the part where you agree with the values and mission of a church can be a slow process, and because you have to feel safe enough to ask your questions.
Sure.
And you have to feel a part of the relationships happening in the church to be able to do that. So we've talked about how it feels to be in a church on both ends, being a part of a church and feeling like you have friends, and it's kind of, intimidating to connect that with mission as well, in the perspective of, well, I'm going to unplug for my friends because there's also a reason why I felt safe here. So I'm going to make somebody else feel that way when they come in. So taking the time to go speak to new people and meet new people and care about that. And then we also have the other side, the receiving end of walking into a church and feeling invisible, but you have all these questions. And so the bare minimum, like you were saying, was just to meet new people and get friends,
Yeah.
But getting to the place where you can ask questions like, I mean, I could walk in to a church and not even think that the God of the Bible is real.
Right.
So, I mean, what would you say to somebody if I got to a place where I was comfortable enough with you as a new friend in a new church community, and I brought the question to you, like, what makes you believe the God of the Bible is real?
Yeah. Well, I had one more thought.
Okay.
If we can push pause on the God of the Bible is real. It's going to take me a second to think through that. But I also wanted to add, so, and I would just listen to you talk, maybe kind of think about it. If you showed up and you're trying to find that church, and let's say you showed up to the church that I lead, if you had an experience at our church where no one talked to you and you were clicked out and you felt like, hey, I don't belong here, and that no one cares that I'm here, and that I felt invisible, 100%, hands down, zero chance. Like, I can't even stress it enough. There's a microphone. I'm afraid I'm gonna hit it with my hand. Like 100%, I want to know.
Right.
I want to know. And so I want you to come and tell me. I want you to stop by in the middle of the week, and I want you to walk into my office, and I want you to be mad about it. It's fine if you're mad about it. And I want you to say, hey, I tried to give God a chance this past week, but I just wanted you to know every single Christian in your whole place that you lead here were so consumed with themselves, I was completely invisible. I was here for an hour and a half. Nobody talked to me. Here's the thing, right? Here's the specifics. And at the end of the day, I'm never coming back. I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Because that's a culture problem. It's not just an individual problem. If you walk into a community of Christians and nobody speaks to you, that's and
the thing is I'm frightened, because I'm sure that there are people listening that have been to Foundation And maybe they had that experience, and I am dreading hearing that, but I also want to hear it. Like when we're not getting it right, I want to know,
right,
because I want to get it right. I don't want to avoid the hard conversation because I'm going to learn something negative about who I am and what we're fostering here in terms of culture and community. I want to hear the conversation because I value the community and the culture so much that I want to make the adjustments we need to make. Sorry,
right.
that was
it requires a
thing.
realigning for sure. Like if you get to a point where the people in your church community are, being a little selfish and that they don't want to share their friends or their time on a Sunday morning, it can get like that when you're really close to people and feel like you're on the same team as people. But yeah, for sure that could use some realigning, especially when people have questions like
right. And I don't think for us in particular, realignment has to happen. We've had to have conversations about, hey, here's the deal. If you're you're part of our foundation team, you don't get to park close to the building, right? You have to go park far away. We've had multiple conversations to say, hey, as our gatherings grow, you can't sit in the back and you can't sit close to the doors because people who are here for the first time and have never been here, and maybe they weren't exactly sure where to park before they got here. And so they got there and then they didn't know they had to check their kids in if they got kids. And so that took a process, and they weren't aware that that's how this worked. And just who knows, whatever. They didn't know where the bathrooms were. So they finally had to find those. And by the time they get to their seat, like the gathering's already started. They saw online, okay, it starts at 9 and 11, and they show up at 8:55, and they don't realize, okay, it's whatever, fill in the blank, and they're not going to be here at 9 or 11. It's going to be 9:05, 9:07. So we've got to save those seats for other people. We try to have those, and sometimes we have to have those from the stage to say, hey, guys, stop. Like those of you who are sitting in the back row, what are you freaking doing?
Yeah.
Like,
the logistics matter.
You got here 20 minutes early.
Right.
And you sat there and talked about football on the back row when there were 396 other seats you could have sat in. Like, come on, move your butt. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's great. I'm glad you said that.
Okay.
Move your butt.
Move your butt. You know what I'm saying? Move your butt. Move your hind parts.
Well,
sorry. What was the question?
The question was,
yes.
What if I'm showing up for the first time into a new community? I get comfortable enough to ask you the question, what makes you believe the God of the Bible is real? What makes you believe that Jesus is who he says he is? How would you answer that?
Yeah. Well, gosh.
I mean, obviously you could answer this for the next 7 days straight.
Yeah.
But for somebody, like you're looking somebody in the eye who's really not sure how to even go about answering that question.
Yeah.
Like, what are the things that they should be looking at? What are the things that make the most sense to somebody who's at ground zero?
My mind goes to a couple of different places. My mind first goes to the historical accuracy of the Bible and how I believe it to be trustworthy through the way that we can study and evaluate its accuracy and its reliability relative to the way that we do it. We look and kind of evaluate every other historical document that we use to create high school and college textbooks, right? I mean, the reliability and the just sheer brilliance of what we have found in the manuscripts that make up our Bible are just unbelievable. But I don't honestly think that most people are interested in that side of things.
Right.
I think the more human side of the answer to that question comes in my own personal life. I've had so many opportunities to choose. Do I follow what I feel like God is leading me to? Or do I do what's safe and what's comfortable and what's easy and what's convenient? And when I begin to look backwards, I can see that when my family or when I had the opportunity to choose to do let's just say that the Bible gives us the way that Jesus would respond to most situations. Right. And Jesus is really simple, right? I mean, we're talking humility and love and care and truth. And so we want to kind of put all those things, when I say care, I mean really compassion. And so we put all those things together and we can figure out how do we respond to pretty much any situation that we've got. And so if I'm going to trust that the Bible is accurate and I'm going to take those descriptors of this is the way that Jesus responds to a situation with love and care and humility and truth, if I'm going to then respond to whatever those situations are, that kind of gives me a feeling of, okay, what does God want me to do in this situation? And a lot of times those attributes, love and care / compassion, humility and truth, leads us to really difficult situations, extremely difficult situations, one where it costs a great deal. And over again in those moments, I found an enormous amount of satisfaction and peace where there shouldn't have been peace, and joy where there shouldn't have been no joy. And the only explanation is God. Like there's no other explanation for how these things happen out of this really tense and tight and desperate situation. And all of a sudden there's this new life, or there's this just overwhelming sense of peace and joy, or there's this maybe blessing is even maybe the right word. And there's just no way those things happen without God. But the truth is that there's no way I choose that path if it wasn't for God. The clear choice is always the other way. It's always the path of least resistance. It's always the easier path, or the one that's clearly more successful, the one that leads towards more money, or that leads towards more ease, or more free time, or more fill in the blank, less conflict, avoidance of conflict, avoidance of difficult discussions, like all of those things. It's less messy. You're not involved in as many people's, like all those things. But then we choose this other side when this compassion kicks in. And again, it's not my compassion. It's the compassion of Jesus that he allows me to borrow, allows us to borrow. And then we pursue that with kindness and truth and humility. The results, it's only God. There's just no other explanation for it,
Right.
There's just no other explanation. My encouragement though is I don't want anyone to take my word for it. I mean, I think it's great if people value what I think, but I think it's even more important for them to discover God on their own. And so I would say, hey, why don't you give God a shot in terms of the study piece? Let's see what the Bible kind of throws out there as, hey, let's just see what the Bible says Jesus is like, whether you believe the Bible to be trustworthy or not. Let's just see what it says. And then when we get to your next crossroads, when we get to your next tension point in your life, when we get to the next place where it's like, I don't know what to do, let's give the principles that you discover about Jesus a shot in that crossroads situation, in that difficult moment. And then you evaluate, right? Don't take my word for it. Let's study together. Let's figure out how would Jesus respond. And when you get the next opportunity, let's respond that way. And let's just see if God puts his money where his mouth is, right? Let's just see, like, all right, God, well, I'm going to do this your way. And you're saying that there's a promise of a peace that passes all understanding. So in other words, I've got peace when there should be no peace, with a joy that sometimes exists even when the happiness or the giddy feeling inside, right? But there's a joy that exists even in the midst of pain. If you're saying that's what you can give, okay, well, let's see it. I'm a place of discovery. So let's see it. Let's see what happens when I follow your principles.
Yeah. In other words, there's a huge part of, the Bible that can be historically reliable.
Yes.
And then there's the other side of, there's a lot of big claims in scripture of what relationship with God will do in your life, and experiencing things like compassion and joy and love in God's way.
Sure.
And so, being able to do things God's way, so to speak, and see how it goes, like you said. Let's see if God puts his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, that's what I would say. God is not afraid to back down from your life's challenges. He's not. And he's not, Jesus isn't interested in leaving you in the moments that you need him most. But he's also not interested in forcing himself on you. So he's not forcing you. He's not forcing himself into your bad situations or your bad decisions or the consequence. He's not forcing himself in there. The way he set this up is, I'm here for you. I know all about you, but I'm giving you the choice whether or not you want to let me in, whether or not you want to give my way a shot. This is up to you. Yeah, it's up to you. And and what's crazy is a lot of times those two questions that we've been talking about, those are connected. Is I'll never give God a shot in the principle side of things because his people never gave me a shot.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that concerns me most, is that as followers of Jesus, a lot of times we don't realize the weight that we carry, that us opening our lives to other people gives them permission or the confidence or maybe even the desire to say, okay, well, maybe I do want to open my life to God, which is scary. It's scary to think that that's the order of operations for a lot of people is, let me see if Jesus people will pay me any attention. And if they do, or if they don't, I'm going to base my opinion and my thoughts about who God is and who Jesus is based upon how his people treated me.
That's how it is in a lot of relationships, though. I mean, you walk into a job even, and somebody doesn't hire you because you have purple hair.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's the same way of like, well, maybe I don't want to work for them anyway. Maybe if I walk into a church and somebody's like, wow, interesting hair.
Right.
I'm going to feel like, okay, well, if that's all you see when you look at me, then that's a big problem for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to trust a relationship with somebody of something so important, like a relationship with the God of the universe, somebody who can't see past my hair color or fill in the blank, whatever you may feel judged for. In a way, you experience so much hypocrisy in the church, and that can definitely, you can make up your mind really fast.
Yeah, but purple hair don't care. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there's plenty of, and again, I don't want to say, hey, there's right churches, wrong churches. Just sometimes there's confused churches or drifting churches or lost churches or stubborn churches. Another word, maybe stuck churches.
Okay.
Maybe stuck churches. And for sure, they might be really upset with me that we have someone on our staff. Her hair color changes twice a year, and it's
At
never.
least.
That's right, and it's never her natural color. So I mean, it's been blue and purple and pink and everything else in between. And who knows? And there's nothing to expect. I don't know what to expect. You just walk in any day and it could be different.
Right.
Much less someone that just comes off the street. Shout out to Robin. Hey, Robin.
Hey, Robin.
I wouldn't have it any other way. But I mean, obviously, hair is a small thing, I mean, goodness, church people can judge folks. We can judge folks.
Bless your heart.
That's right. Bless our hearts. we can judge folks with the best of them. I mean, we can judge about clothes, church clothes. Did you, I don't know, when you were growing up from a church standpoint, did you have church clothes that you wore?
For the most part, I think I did. I think most of my church experience was with my grandmother.
Okay.
And while she's she can get with the rest of them, like she don't really care much, but at least she's gonna, there's definitely an outfit set aside.
Yeah.
But for sure, I grew up in some friendships where it was like, we're going to church in the morning if you want to sleep over on Saturday. So make sure you bring a church outfit. And I'm like, what does that mean? Okay. What does that even mean?
Yeah, no, I know when I think about church clothes, I think, something's getting tucked in.
Yeah.
Right. Something's getting tucked in and something that, the
ironing board comes out.
That's right. And probably something gets buttoned up.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go old school, I mean, then for fellas, there's a tie There's a tie around the neck, and then there's a jacket.
Yep.
You know, like put the whole thing together. And now, I mean, my grandfather, he wore a suit to church every Sunday. At least when I was young, you know, when I was really young, and he was a part of the, you know, offering and communion group, and they, you know, they come out and they do this whole march around thing, and everybody does this whole thing. And sure enough, if you're going to participate in that group, if you're going to take up offering or you want to take up communion, you better have a suit and tie, you know, put it together, you know.
Put on your suit and tie and then come ask your question. That's
right. As long as they're not tough questions.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's not too tough questions.
In that case, just open your Bible and figure it out.
That's right. Yeah. Good luck. There's just, you know, 60-something books and, you know, a few thousand pages. You know, you'll be fine. It's in there. Just turn to the index in the back and pretend it's Google, and good luck. For sure, I think there's plenty of things that people can judge other folks on. A friend of mine, though, I'm still not positive if I'm really into the show. Okay. It's called Ted Lasso. Have you heard of this Ted Lasso thing?
I have heard.
Okay. So,
that's the extent of my knowledge.
So I've watched it a little bit, and I'm not sure I'm fully committed to the show. However, there's this one scene where he's throwing some darts, and it turns out this one guy is really good at darts, and he has no idea that Ted Lasso, this main character, is not just really good at darts. He's like freaking awesome at darts.
Okay.
You know, and so he looks at him like it's the little last dart throw, and he's about to win. And this whole time they made this huge bet on who was going to win. And Ted Lasso, he's kind of looking back at this guy, and he's like, hey, you know, the thing is, people can be judgmental, but the better thing to do is to be curious. And if you were curious, it would have probably saved you from losing this. It's basically saying, if you were curious, it would have saved you from losing this bet, because you probably would have asked me, hey, do you ever play darts? And I would have told you. And he goes into this thing like, I've played more darts than you can ever shake a stick at. And then he throws the exact thing he needs to do. It's like perfect bullseye, and it's over, and he wins the whole thing. And I think for sure that's got to be, that's got to be the approach that we take as followers of Jesus, is when someone shows up, no matter what context they show up in, our first thought can't be, let me draw conclusions.
Okay.
Our first thought has to be, I want to know more. I want to know more. I want to know why they made this choice.
I like that.
Maybe I don't agree with their choice, right? Maybe let's just take the hair thing. Maybe I would never dye my hair pink, but I'd actually like to get to know him, and ask the question like, so tell me what in your brain was like, man, this is fire. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's be a little curious about people. And I think that curiosity also can be something that, you know, drives us to make connections we would have never made before.
Right.
You know, because we decide to be curious. I think that's a really good thing. I mean, Ted Lasso didn't write the Bible, but for sure in that moment, I think that reflects a lot about, you know, the overall nature of Jesus.
For sure.
I think that really, really nails it.
I definitely agree. So, I mean, in the face of somebody being faced with hypocrisy or judgment, so to speak, in church because of, you know, general things, you should have the expectation that people should be curious about you instead of judgmental right off the bat. So having, you know, I know that there's a lot to me. I know how much I bring to the table, being confident in that, and having the expectation of other people should want to know me, just like I want to know other people.
Yeah.
And I think so much of that judgment that people may experience can translate as, you know, kind of a final opinion. You know, a first impression can sometimes end up being a final opinion.
Right.
And in the end, you might mistreat somebody in the process, making a small observation about them in a way that wasn't communicating curiosity and instead communicated a little bit of judgment.
Right.
So speaking of mistreatment, I mean, some people are in communities, church communities or circles where it's not just judgment or a sense of hypocrisy happening. It's actual, like they're a little bit mistreated because of their physical appearance. So, I mean, maybe an example would this be, they dress a little differently, and that's all anybody says about them, or it's the color of their skin, or, fill in the blank. Maybe there's something about you that you feel has been the source of mistreatment. I mean, what would you say in a situation where somebody is trying to connect in a community, but they have that experience of being mistreated?
When it comes to things that are out of our control, like maybe it's not like, especially when you got me with the color of skin piece, which, I don't know if I can talk to if it's generally applicable towards everything, because obviously racism has been an enormous issue that the church has struggled with for centuries. And so I don't want to say, hey, what the solution is there applies to everything, because it's very unique, a very unique experience for people of color, or people that are just different. Any minority that shows up where the majority doesn't look like them, you know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden they're treated a certain way. What I have found, and not that I have all the answers, but what I have found is that typically it's a lack of experience and education. And when I say it, so I guess when you have a lack of experience and education, the result of that is ignorance, right? You just don't know. And so, and sometimes you had the opportunity for education and experience, but when you got into it, and specifically talking about race, you didn't want to, once you actually started learning a little bit, you decided, no, I actually like life better when I could be upset about someone's skin color. Like you enjoy that more because maybe it's the culture you were brought up in, or maybe the family you were brought up in. And so if you start getting educated and experience a little bit more, and you have you're exposed to some things that kind of change that view, all of a sudden that's really inconvenient. That's an inconvenient truth for you to find. So you just decide, I don't want to do that. I'd rather just stay blissfully ignorant and draw my conclusions. The truth is that the greatest way to break through that, the right way to break through that, is for the person who's doing the wrong to look inside of themselves and make the adjustment. And while that's the right thing to do, I'm also a realist, and that's not typically the way that people make adjustments. Typically, the way people make adjustments is the person that is wronged figures out a way to get closer to the person doing the wronging, which is so counter what our culture wants to do. If you wrong me, then, you best to get to stepping, right? I want distance between us. Mm-hmm. And what we see with Jesus, though, is a difference. He's like, if you're doing something wrong, I want to get closer to you. I want you to learn the humanity behind who I am. I want you to realize that I'm not a descriptor, that I'm not a specific color. That's not who I am. That I'm not a list of these things, these attributes that you see in me, but I'm actually, to put a biblical phrase for it, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And I want you to know that. And so I'm going to figure out a way to get closer to you. That is so counter, which is difficult to ask a non-follower of Jesus that shows up and is discriminated against to say, hey, get closer to those people, and I don't know if that's a realistic expectation, but for sure, that's the greatest way to break through someone's stereotypes, is for them to make a friend, a genuine relationship with someone who's in the stereotype that they were discriminatory against, right? How else do you do that? It requires someone with an enormous amount of bravery. And I don't, the thing is that I'm not in that situation, right? So it's easy for me to say that, but as I've seen other people that have skin the same color as me, at least when I find success, the successes come when someone that of a different color pushed through the hate and figured out a way to create a relationship, and that started actually changing the person's heart. I don't think that's the best way for it to be done. The best way is for the person that's doing the offending to look inside themselves and make the adjustment. I just don't know if that's what happens most often. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that's what typically, it's what should happen. It's just not what I see typically happens in terms of bring us some success. I'm not sure if that's really what your question was.
Yeah,
but.
I mean, in a way, what comes to my mind, just generally speaking, the saying, kill them with kindness. Yeah. And in a way, it's like nobody, when they're mistreated, is their first instinct to be kind. Like that's not what is stirred up in you emotionally. But I think there's some truth to the saying, kill them with kindness, because, and it's not so much in my mind, it's not anything, but I want whatever hatred or dislike or disdain in you that is causing you to mistreat me. I want that to be gone. Like, sure. I would like to put that to death. Right. And so being kind to somebody puts that to death in a lot of ways. And being able to, look at somebody who's mistreated you in kindness and compassion, no matter where you're at spiritually or where you're at emotionally, does way more for them than it will for you. Sure.
The dangerous thing about kindness and compassion, specifically in the direction of someone who's offending you or doing something wrong towards you, is that it leaves you vulnerable. And vulnerability is not one of the virtues that we really value in our culture. And honestly, it's not one that's celebrated. It's one that we try to avoid. Right. And it's, again, we're in the context, or at least it seems like I think we're in the context of saying someone shows up to a church and they're discriminated against. And I kind of just specifically narrowed or kind of drilled down on, color of skin. Someone's discriminated against. And so then we say, okay, well, the way to fix this is for you to be vulnerable. It feels like that expectation is unreasonable, though I actually believe that is the way to fix it. But the thing is when we become vulnerable, it's not vulnerable with safeguards. Like, okay, well, Clint said to be vulnerable, and then it ended up costing me, right? I ended up getting hurt worse. That unfortunately is often the price of vulnerability, is that we get hurt more than if we had not been. And how many times can we be vulnerable before they get it right? And is this really our price to pay, since they're the ones in the wrong? Especially when, as someone who's a follower of Jesus, and maybe for sure, I don't speak for all church people, but in this moment, speaking for Jesus followers, honestly, we should be the ones that are getting this right. We should be the ones that are setting the example. But it's a messy situation for sure.
In other words, if you're facing that kind of situation from people claiming to be followers of Jesus, it's not the way it's supposed to be.
It isn't. And that's another situation where if it's at our church, which I mean, again, I don't know how many people listening are actually our church people. I want to know about it.
Right.
Right. I don't want this to be an experience. Even if you decide, as someone who's just on the fringes, if you decide, hey, you know what, I gave God a shot at Foundation and I was discriminated against because of my color of my skin, and I've decided I will never set foot in that building again or in anything that this church does because I am done with it. Even still, I still want to know about it. Right. I still want to know about it because we've got to do better. Yes. But both encouragement of things we do well, as well as constructive criticism, both of those things help us get better at what we do as a church.
Right.
And for sure, we never want to become a church or a movement of people, of Jesus followers, that are content with the things that we've achieved. We constantly want to be asking the question, what is it that we can tweak and do better to be better followers of Jesus? Because when we're better followers of Jesus, our community benefits. The things that happen in our community are better because of Jesus followers, when we really are inconveniencing ourselves for the good of other people, and we're leveraging the resources that we have for the good of other people, and we're bringing our talents and skills and abilities and knowledge to the table for the good and the benefit of other people. Community prospers and benefits. And so for sure, if we've got some issues that people are experiencing and it's causing them disconnect from God, there's two things happening. Number one, we're getting worse as a church. The second thing, though, is that the community then, through this conduit that the church typically is, right? Our church is supposed to be a conduit from people into the community that it exists in. That means that the way that God has wired you, that you are not then going through that conduit to really add value and to give the gift that you are to the community. Now you can go find another church and maybe you can do it on your own, but I also believe that there's power in collective numbers. When we do something together, we can accomplish a whole heck of a lot more. And so, yeah, of course everyone's a gift individually, but when we pool our gifts together and our brains together and our ideas together and our resources together and our efforts together and our passions together, obviously the benefit is exponentially larger. And so the community is robbed when you have a bad experience and you disconnect from church. Right. And then of course the church is robbed if leadership is not made aware of it for them to address it and to fix it. Right.
In other words, they may have lost a churches may have lost the opportunity to have you there.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that somebody else should lose the opportunity. So even if it is something that you're completely done with, you have no interest in being a part of the community because of something that has happened to you, that doesn't mean take it off the table, don't tell anybody. I think bringing it to leadership's attention is a huge part of essentially making it better for somebody else.
Right. Give a gift to someone you've never met.
Right.
Right. Be the gift of awareness, of bringing awareness to the heartache that you experienced. So there's not somebody else coming behind you that experiences the same thing, Right. And then of course it's up to leadership to do something about it. And when we think through making adjustments in church, that's some of those are difficult. So rarely is it let's snap our fingers and let's, everything's fixed, because typically church issues involve people, and people are complex. Excuse me.
Right.
People are complex, and people are messy, and people, it takes time to help people change and to discover what they need to do. And so it's never just a snap your fingers and then, okay, everything's, honky dory. Let's move on. Hunky dory. That's hunky dory. What?
Hunky, chunky.
Not chunky dory. Yeah. Just keep swimming. Hunky dory. Hunky dory.
We'll go with it.
Whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't happen that quick. It takes time because it's a people.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot today.
Yeah.
I mean, seems like we've talked about a wide range of things that would affect somebody who may already have their mind made up about who Jesus is, and maybe some people are listening thinking that some of their thoughts were represented here and they don't believe that Jesus is who he says he is, or they're not sure. In other words, I think our hope for these conversations is that whether you think you have your mind made up or not, that you're opening your mind to consider different perspectives that, put your decision vulnerable again, if you think that you have your mind made up, we're hoping these conversations will bring them back to the table and have you consider what it may be like for somebody who's not like you, or for anybody else, really.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of what you have represented in a lot of ways in the way that you communicate with people as a pastor, and how you decide to pastor people in a way of making them comfortable with not having their mind made up, or, kind of in a way convincing them that they should undo decisions in a lot of ways that they've made up. So how would you describe your relationship in communication to people who may be listening on either side? Like, what is your hope, so to speak, for hearing conversations like this, besides just, bringing new thoughts to the table?
My hope is that people who are disconnected or feel far from God or feel like God's a long ways off, that maybe they would give just a teeny tiny little, one more teeny tiny chance to figure out who God is and if Jesus is significant. And maybe to engage, or maybe the word is to re-engage with a process of discovery. I think that's the best I can hope for someone who's disconnected from faith. I don't want anyone to take my word for it.
Yeah.
I want them to discover for themselves. And if I can help that process of discovery, I'm all in. I think the important word there, though, is process. Is I want to be a realist when it comes to someone making a decision about who Jesus is, that a lot of times it's not a momentary thing, or if it is, I mean, I do feel like for sure sometimes churches can be really great at emotional manipulation, where we can create moments and scenes for people. Yeah. And that if we really leverage and press down hard, we can make someone feel emotionally that, okay, this is the way it is. But the truth is the best Jesus living doesn't happen in emotional moments. Right. It happens in the mundane, day to day. We get 168 hours in a week, and church is just one of them if you're a churchgoer. So the other 167 hours, like that's where the magic of Jesus following actually happens. Yeah. And that there's no emotion there. There's no soft music. There's no song. There's nothing like that. It's just the decision. Do I trust Jesus to do it his way, or do I not? And so that takes process, and it takes time. And so I'm not in a hurry. I feel a sense of urgency because I do believe Jesus is incredibly significant. And at the same time, I have to balance that sense of urgency with the reality that people who don't care about Jesus or God or the church aren't urgent about any of that. No. And so they're not going to take my sense of urgency and adopt it for themselves. And so that's an unrealistic expectation. And so I want to share. I want to do everything I can with a sense of urgency, while at the same time creating space and opportunity for people to go through their process of discovery. And I think that's what we want to do. And then for the follower of Jesus, I always feel like I can be more direct in terms of, or maybe not direct is not the right word, but more forceful. Like I want to tell the follower of Jesus, let's get our act together. Get it together. Like just get it together. Like, what are we doing? If we're not prioritizing people who are trying to discover, is Jesus significant, then what are we doing? Point? Yeah. What are we doing? What's the point? Like there's plenty of country clubs already. If we wanted a country club, just go to the country club. Yeah. Just go to the country club. Whatever it is, wherever you're in the country, if it's yacht club, then go to the yacht club, or what tennis club, or what's the other club? What's the other club that we have? The new paddle game? Pickleball. Right?
It's big here, Nan.
Yeah, it's huge.
Big time. We have the House of Pickleball.
Yeah. So is there a pickleball club?
Oh,
like a country
absolutely.
Club? Okay.
I mean, well, maybe not like a country club. There's a Friends of Pickleball.
Friends group. Of Pickleball. Yeah. So if that's what you want, then that's what then go do that. But if we're going to be about church, if we're going to have this church thing, this bride of Christ, bride of Jesus thing, then we've got to be about what Jesus wants us to be about, which is people who are disconnected from him. And the reason they're disconnected, according to what the Bible says, and I think the Bible is trustworthy, is because evil's real. And the result of evil is, us kind of siding with things that disagree with God and disagree with what he desires for us. And then we begin to adopt that as our way of life and the way that we go about things. And suddenly there's this disconnection, and we've got to be about helping undo that disconnection. Mm-hmm. More than anything else. And the result of that, though, is when I see followers of Jesus, when I see that click for them, they begin to live a more satisfied Jesus following life. Yeah. And I think that's what it's about. And then the friendships come, the community comes, the connection comes, the all the things that we're actually yearning for in our life. It just begins to make much more sense. Mm-hmm. It begins to make real sense. When it's kind of in that lens. So if you're a follower of Jesus, I'm saying, come on, what are we doing? What are we doing? What do we do? And if you're sitting out there like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what your circumstance or your situation is. So let's try and talk about it. Right? Mm-hmm. Let's try and talk about it.
And that's why we're here. We're talking about it.
That's it. So I think this would be cool. So maybe there's some people out there like, I'd love to hear some conversation about XYZ, whatever that thing is. And so I was thinking, like, the easiest way for them to do that would be for them to just text in some thoughts.
Okay.
Right. So I think if they want to do that, they can just simply text the word podcast to 678-661-6330. That's it. If they text the word podcast, it's going to reply back and say, hey, what do you can leave some feedback there. Or if you've got some things that you want to like, hey, this is what I would like. This is what I would like to see. You can just respond to the text and it'll go into, and you and I'll sit and kind of figure out, hey, what are the things that people are, and we'll just start making episodes based on that. Or they can leave it in the comments.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you
Either
can
one.
Comment. Definitely. I think these conversations, we want them to be, from the source, so to speak. So, I mean, we can sit here and talk about what we want to talk about all day, but we would definitely value your feedback, and whatever that you have on your mind is what we want to put on our mind.
I mean, if we were talking about what I wanted to talk about, we would talk about Braves baseball and how we need a shortstop.
Yeah. In case you didn't know, we are sitting in a room full of Braves memorabilia.
Yeah.
Clint's office is a little bit of a shrine.
It's not a shrine. There's other things in here. There's books. There's things.
There are things. I
will say that you are sitting behind or in front of one of my most prized possessions, which is the Sports Illustrated from the Braves winning the World Series in 2021.
Wow.
And Will Smith signed it he doesn't know me, but he knows a friend of mine, and the friend of mine, they got it signed. And so it's one of my favorite things I have. And you're sitting right there really close to it. But it's been great because I've interacted with you, and every once in a while I look over and I'm like, oh, we won the World Series. Yeah. That's right. Go Braves.
You and Will.
That's it. Yeah, that's right.
Well, anyway, we want to thank you guys for listening to the Flatbill Pastor Podcast.
How about that?
And we will see you next month. Thanks again, and have a great week.
See ya.